Greetings Capricorn, and a warm welcome to your in-depth year 2024 astrology and horoscope forecast. This is for the sun or the ascendant. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of how I'm going to structure the video. In October 2023, we're going to have two eclipses, one a solar, the second a lunar in your sister earth sign of Taurus, and they're going to combine but provide a very compelling influence that goes through the first quarter of this year. But also, at that very moment that year 2024 dawns, we can create your solar return. And that chart and the influences within are going to be very powerful over the next 12 months. So I need to check that out for you. We also need to be conscious that as the year begins, Mercury, the planet of communication, is in a retrograde, and we are going to have a series of 4 fire Mercury retrogrades this year. Now, fire is very much to do with passion, but for you, they're going to occur in very psychological areas. So I will explore that. But also we need to be mindful of the influence of your ruler, and that is Saturn. Saturn actually forges a marvellous link to Jupiter through the first 3 months of this year. And I've got lots of exciting things to tell you about your financial potential that really starts to manifest in a much more positive way early in 2024. We need to check out the planet of fortune, Jupiter. It is in a delicious location right through to the 26th of May. And in fact, on the 23rd of May, I can't wait to tell you about a planetary influence then that could prove to be seminal and really quite fortunate. But the position of Jupiter is to do with how you socialize, can be to do with where you're more speculative, but it also can be to do with romance. Now, as we make our way into the year more deeply, we are going to see Pluto move from your sign back into Aquarius. So I need to share with you about that. Now, last year it was just in Aquarius for 11 weeks. This year it's going to be over 30 weeks, and it's going to be influencing your sector of everyday values and self-worth. But you have a whole collective coming in to support you in a very dynamic way. So that's really very, very exciting. But then we get to at the end of March, we have a lunar eclipse which mirrors the solar eclipse of the 14th of October. And this is asking some questions about where you live and how you live there. But also we then have a solar eclipse on the 8th of April, which provides a backdrop for the following 6 months. And it's in the part of your situation, again, very much asking you to make a good balance between your emotional home and family needs and how you make an impact on the wider stage. But Mercury is retrograde in that particular event, and it is about 5 degrees away from the eclipse. Not incredibly powerful in itself, but it is going to be in that 4th house along with that eclipse, and you also are going to have the North Node there and Chiron. So where you live, how you live there, and whom with is going to be a big theme for this year, but at the same time juggling the success and impact you want to have in the wider world. Now, once Jupiter moves on the 26th of May, it moves into a sector of health, fitness and jobs, and that can be an area that can strengthen up for you in the second half of the year. But we also have your personal new moon, and this is going to happen on the 12th of January. So that comes early for you in your personal year, but it does have an interesting angle to the nodal axis, which I need to explore with you. But excitingly, it does link well with Uranus. So Uranus, the planet of the unexpected, can be disruptive, but it has been really quite exciting for you personally over the last 3 or 4 years. But it is going to impact on your personal new moon. That takes us into the back end of the year. We have another eclipse series starting on the 18th of September in the watery sign of Pisces, very close to Neptune. And for you, that's about how you think and how you express yourself. Great if you're an artist or a healer, could be a bit more challenging in other ways. And then as we come into the back end of the year, your potential to seize prizes and gain greater recognition is really going to be emphasized in a big way. But then, as the year comes to a close, a weird synchronicity, Mercury goes back into retrograde in a very tender part of your scope. So much to get through. Also, Mars is going to be going retrograde, a planet which is exalted in your sign, just as the curtain comes down on year 2024. But I'm going to go through all of this now in very great detail, so please stay with me for more. I'd just like to share with you a very special opportunity. If you're watching this video in year 2023, you can order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data, and I will prepare for you the rest of year 2023 free of charge. If you're ordering within year 2024, you will get a full 12 months from the exact time of your order. You will also, my special package, get 30% off and your character analysis report, your life roadmap. This will help you to understand the patterns that have repeated themselves in your situation, help you to seize upon the opportunities and get a much more intimate understanding of some of the challenges and how you can work with them future forwards in a more effective way. Please see beneath this video for more information. So Capricorn, let's first of all look at those two eclipses which occur in October. The first is in the sign of Libra, very much about balance, but also about fairness and relationships. But it's very close to the South Node. And if your instinct is that you've yet to receive the recognition that you truly deserve for all your hard work and application, the chances are as you go into year 2024, you can really set your sights high. And that desire to gain greater respect from others is also needing to toggle with the last of the Scorpio-Taurus eclipse series that we have on the 28th in your sister Earth sign of Taurus, which is all about showcasing your individuality. So because you have a good understanding of the way things are, an appreciation of structures, the expectations people have, but I feel that what this combination is doing is saying that your professional relationships need to understand that it's important for you to show your flair too. It's not just about going through the processes in some predetermined way. You need to be more yourself as you come into this new year. And this is particularly so if you don't have your own enterprise and you do work in a bigger business. So this is where this could show itself. So some kind of new start or setting some new targets around your professional situation is going to be key as you come into the first months of year 2024. Now, that solar return on the screen now shows the sun, as always, in your sign at 10 degrees and 2 minutes. So that's the first house. And that's very much about initiation, getting things off the ground. But I want to share with you something that's really quite magical on this year's particular solar return. Because if you count forwards, you can see that Jupiter, the planet of growth and good fortune, for the first time in 12 years, is back in the part of your situation that's to do with expressing yourself. And that, of course, is where that lunar eclipse is encouraging you onwards to. However, you also have Uranus there. So that has made you perhaps a little bit more rebellious in recent times, but that link between the Sun and Jupiter is 120 degrees-ish. It's about 4 degrees out, but a trine in astrology is one of the most fortunate aspects, and the Sun in a trine with Jupiter is right up there with the best of them. So that's a very lucky alliance. But then look up and see in house 9 the moon is in the sign of Virgo, also your sister Earth sign, and the three positions are relating to each other all around about 120 degrees. The moon and Jupiter is almost exact. So that's called a grand Earth trine. But let's look at the houses they're in. So the sun in Capricorn is in house 1, very much about initiation, drive, and self-belief in your individual way of doing things. Jupiter's in house 5, where you need to showcase your talents, flair, creativity, and no little sense of humour. The moon's in the free-spirited 9th house, and that doesn't like to be fettered too much. So around your emotional life this year, I think a degree of variety and spontaneity is going to be important. But the most key thing in any natal chart is the planet which is most visible, and in this case it is the moon. So you can see the truth of your emotional situation, the 9th house, the higher truth, has to be expressed in an earthy way through the sign of Virgo, but you also need to feel that you can be totally authentic. But that's a very fiery set of influences coming through the prism of Earth, but for you, potentially very fortunate. So I think that this is a year when you can be very enterprising, but also great fun to be with, and get on the front foot and really show people just how dramatic you can be in your approach. Is there a catch? Well, there is. Because, to be honest, Capricorn, having Mercury in your 12th house in a retrograde could ask some questions around your self-confidence and self-worth. Mercury's detrimented in the sign of Sagittarius, but it's very close to Mars. And having Mercury and Mars together in Sagittarius, which is very much to do with speaking and information, but also feeling unfettered. But the 12th house is very psychological. So I think it's possible you are going to encounter some challenges this year from people who may not have your best interests at heart, but they may not openly express their opposition to you, because the position that Mercury and Mars are in is house 12, but you also have Venus there. So the relating planets of Venus, the planet of communication, Mercury, and the planet of urgency and action, Mars, are all in the 12th house, very psychological. So in order to achieve the best from the eclipses that you were given in October, and this grand Earth trine between the Sun, Jupiter and the moon, you are going to have to keep the maximum faith within yourself. Because whether it's through neighbours, people you encounter in your community, local events, or perhaps even siblings, I feel that there could be some opposition this year. You can see that your ruler Saturn applies to Venus in a square, 3 degrees against 2, almost exact. And you can see that Neptune in your sector of everyday communication applies in a square to Mercury and Mars. Now that could, at times, if information comes in or you hear things or read things, you could be more affected by social media, for example, this year than perhaps ever before. My advice to you is to try and steer a little bit away from it if you start to feel that it's undermining your confidence. Because we can all see what people share on Facebook, for example. They've been to this marvellous concert, they've an exotic holiday, their family member has achieved this. And if in some way there's any exclusion going on, I think you could be more attuned to that in a way which is a little bit wounding. But you have a great planetary ace in your deck, if you like, for this year's events, and that is the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon. The Sun, how we manifest our individuality; the Moon, how we're more receptive, aware of security and shelter and nurture. The balance between those two, which means the balance of the energy of this year's chart, is at 8 degrees in Scorpio. Now, Scorpio energy is pretty robust, but it's also up for change, but it's also for you in the 11th house. But because it's so psychological, I feel that that collection of energy in Sagittarius which is challenged quite strongly in the 12th house with Mercury in its detrimented zone in retrograde, means that if you let little snippets of information or bits and pieces of gossip or that stuff on Facebook affect you, it is not going to be helpful to you this year. But what the Scorpio midpoint tells you is stick with the friends you really can trust, those very solid citizens who have been there and don't let you down. And if there are some fair weather players in your world, romantically or socially, they will need to be wheedled out this year. They will. And part of the reason for that is that if we look at the position of the moon, the most visible planet in your chart, that is directly opposed by Saturn. So your ruler is saying to you that you will need to be stern and maybe a little bit thick-skinned at times about articulating Saturn third house everyday speaking, your higher truth, the moon. So if there is something that isn't working for you, you have to say it to protect yourself, because there will be times this year where I feel communication could go a little bit awry. It could be frustrating because there's a series of fire Mercury retrogrades. That's to do with passion, but that passion can feed into your psyche. So you have a wonderful solar return, but you do have a degree of delicacy in it. And so just brace yourself that you're going to need to be a little bit more circumspect about the people you spend time with. But the good people in your life are likely to become even more important. And you know, Jupiter is at the other end of, it's on the descendant pretty well of the midpoint between the sun and the moon. And that suggests that one relationship can come into your world this year that could turn out to be really key. It won't necessarily be automatically a romantic relationship, but having Jupiter in your fifth house of romance and play and sociability through to the 26th of May is clearly something to savour. And it is being influenced by that midpoint right on the 7th house cusp. So that's really could be lucky. So whether it's a business contact, a friendship, a new association, as long as that trust issue is good, this can be a really scintillating year for you. But the trust around communications, your communications you need to be very mindful of what people's motives are. And if people are withholding a little bit from you with that 12th house energy, or your own insecurities or self-doubts are stopping you flow quite as well as you might. So as you make your way into the new year, Mercury does go into forward motion on the 2nd. But one of the things I would say to you, Capricorn, is the sign of Sagittarius is very much about knowledge and higher truths. Mercury is about communication, can be about reading, writing, learning things. So the combination of those two, but in your 12th house, means one of the ways you can work with Mercury, because remember it's going to be retrograde twice in your 12th house in terms of its influence this year, is to actually accept that maybe there are some things you can gain from checking out more information. And anything to do with personal development, self-growth, workshops, courses, if you are active in that area, you can turn that into a real positive possibility. But that does bring us more into the new year. And the next truly big event is your personal new moon, which occurs on the 11th of January this year. It forges a sparkling link to Uranus, suggesting that innovation can still be a big part of what you can benefit from this year. You're known as the planet of traditionality, but I think Uranus has been challenging even your own thinking in recent years. You may have been a bit more daring about your social choices, your love life, and just your general outlook may in some ways have been modernized by Uranus's influence. Now, Uranus has actually forged some very positive links to the sun over the last 2 or 3 solar returns over the last few years. So this is not a particularly new theme, but if you do try something that's more novel, just be aware that your personal new moon on the 11th does T-square with the nodal axis. So making this work, this individuality or this experimentation, or this freedom love inside of your nature, making it thread into your life effectively, needs to also balance against the need for security, the North Node in the 4th house, and also what you're wanting to achieve professionally. And as I mentioned before, if you work in a big organisation, sometimes it can be much more difficult to show flair and innovation because there's an expectation of a particular job or role we should fulfil. But it depends on where you are in that business. It could be that you are someone who is pushing an agenda for change. You're very comfortable with playing some kind of role in disrupting, but disrupting in a positive way. But certainly if you're someone who works for yourself or you're a very creative person, I think that's a very positive new moon for you. Now, more good news for you, because on the 5th of January, you also had Mars, the planet of passion, but also individuality, move into your sign. So that's augmenting your new moon as well. Mars is going to be with you through to the 13th of February. If you do decide to check out the sales, the chances are you may want to give your personal appearance some kind of makeover, understandable. But also Mars in your sign is exalted, so it's very good for motoring forwards on plans, having more physical drive and energy, because at the turn of the year, Mars in the 12th house is a very up and down emotional energy. Mars moving into your sign on the 5th brings you into the moment and gives you more self-assuredness. But also from the 23rd of January through to the 5th of February, Venus is going to join your sign as well. And this combination, because there is obviously a bit of an overlap, is going to be very good for your personal self-confidence. So despite the fact that there was those psychological influences through Venus, Mars and Mercury in your 12th house at the start of the year, these are kind of saying to you, look, one of the great things about being a Capricorn is your stamina, but also your shrewdness. You know, you can be very wise. And this is an opportunity for you to really invest in the things that excite you, whether it is someone you like, whether it is a new hobby, whether it is a potential business idea. You're really going to be buzzing right at the start of January with Mars into your sign, the new moon in your sign, and Venus joining your sign from the 23rd. Absolutely fab. But what about money, resources, and self-worth? Well, they're governed by the 2nd solar house. And until Saturn, your ruler, moved into Pisces on the 7th of March last year, Saturn had been pummeling that part of your situation for 2.5 years. And you may have felt the pinch. It could have been partly to do with COVID restrictions and how that affected your life, or maybe it was the first part of the financial crunch that we've all been going through. But I'm going to make quite the bold prediction. If anyone can be quite the magician in the tarot in terms of taking your ideas and drive, remember that wonderful ground earth trine at the start of this year is now augmented in January by your new moon, Mars and Venus. If anyone can take all that drive and passion and convert it into something more tangible, and that could be the filthy lucre, it's going to be you. Because on the 21st of January, we are going to see the sun move into Aquarius, as it always does around this time of the year. Sometimes it can be the 20th, the 22nd, but as it does so Pluto, having been with you, but all for 11 weeks, for the last 15 years since 2008, moves with the sun into Aquarius. Now there's a huge symbolism to this, because when Pluto was discovered, first of all, they thought it was the 8th of February. But then they checked out the plates afterwards and realised there was a photograph of Pluto that was taken on the 21st of January. So it's its birthday. And on its birthday, it returns to the sign that it was discovered within. So Pluto, it may be the modern higher octave ruler of the sign of Scorpio, but it does have its sun in Aquarius. So of course the sign of Aquarius is about the collective, it's about friendships, You could even have some planets in Aquarius, because planets often go either side of the sun. So you could have some in Sag, some in Aquarius. Depends on where your sun is within Capricorn. But this is going to really activate for over about 38 weeks this year. We'll come back into your sign later this year briefly. But this is going to really see some massive transformations in terms of the foundations of your existence. And this is really, really exciting. Now, it is going to come back into your sign from the 2nd of September through to the 20th of November, but then it will go back into Aquarius. It's going to be there for a long time. But also, Mercury, the planet of communication, that could potentially provide that mischief for you at the turn of the year, that moves into your second house from the 5th of February to the 23rd of March. But Mars moves from your sign on the 13th of Feb through to the 23rd of March. And then Venus moves into Aquarius from the 17th of Feb to the 12th of March. This is a stellar array of influences. And when Venus moves into the second house in its annual journey, in terms of solar astrology, it never, without fail, does not trigger some kind of piece of serendipity around money. The trick with Venus, because in the second house it can also be where we appreciate its more sensual Taurian benefits, so good food, good wine, calorific goodies, being quite generous to loved ones, particularly in Aquarius where it's very humanitarian. But this stack of energy that comes after the big push around your individual desires and aims earlier in January, once we get to the 21st of January, you can see there's a big shift going on. And I think that despite the squeeze that's gone on, you're going to start to find ways to gain traction, to make good decisions, to have some stroke of fortune. It really can be very dynamic and exciting for you. Now, what about your home life and your emotions, Capricorn? Because the North Node is in your 4th house now, where it moved last true North Node, last 17th of July. But at the end of February, it does go conjunct Chiron. If there is some family matters that have never really been satisfactory for you, it could be a relationship with a parent, sibling, another wider family member, there is an opportunity for some healing. It's not something you can guarantee because Chiron is so complex, but the North Node does provide a chance, but it's up to the other person as much as you. You can't control that. But some kind of healing around your past, around the wound that's deep within you, that's deep within all of us, but this year could be around something to do with the family or home. There is a chance to work on that towards the end of February. But Mercury, the planet of communication, which starts this year in your 12th house, moves into another fire sign, your 4th house, for 10 weeks from the 10th of March through to the 15th of May. So there is going to be a lot of thinking about where you live. And also, Mercury goes retrograde from the 1st of April to the 25th of April. So if you were trying to move home, do an extension, get some contractors in, there is the potential for maybe some stuff to go a little bit awry, but also to revisit things and to find new ways of working with the resources or attitudes that you have. But we do have at the end of March also a lunar eclipse, which is the mirror of the solar eclipse of the 14th of October. And this one's occurring in your 10th house, but it's saying that recognition that I spoke to that's going to be so important this year, particularly in terms of how people close to you feel. You know, it could be that your colleagues and your professional associates are very well aware of your talents and your abilities. But if there's very rarely a word of praise at home, I think that's something that you can be more conscious of from that lunar eclipse. But that brings us to the solar eclipse of the 8th of April, and that's very much about where you live and how you live there, and it's going to be an influence that lasts for 6 months. But Mercury is pretty close, as I said before, in a retrograde. So a 5-degree gap on the orb, with eclipses, usually planets need to be very close to have an impact, but that's in terms of the natal chart. I feel that Mercury being in a retrograde suggests you could do some rethinking around those family politics or dynamics or your emotional situation over the next 6 months in quite a big way. Now, when it comes to business and contracts this year, Capricorn, you are going to have in the summer, July, August and September, a retrograde that goes between Leo, 8th house, business, money, and Virgo, 9th house, contracts and clarity, which could prove to be a little bit frustrating, but you will emerge from it. But the other thing to tell you is that Mars, the planet of passion and desire, also moves into your 8th house late in the year, but goes into a retrograde in December. So those are two areas that are going to require a degree of patience. But this is where you're an ace, because you tend to work through things in a very progressive, steady, bit by bit way, which means that you can assess things, make decisions, get clear and go again. So even if some of the information coming back to you seems confused through the summer months in the north and of course the winter in the south, I feel that you will make sense of those by the time that Mercury leaves the sign of Virgo and goes into the sign of Libra on the 26th of September. But what about romance? Romance, Jupiter is in your 5th house, as I mentioned, through to the 26th of May. That's really exciting. But Venus is in your sister Earth sign of Taurus from the 25th of April to the 24th of May. And this is the really exciting standout piece of information. Venus is conjunct Jupiter on the 23rd of May. If you are single and you'd like to meet someone this year, that week could be really critical, but I must stress Jupiter is in your 5th house for the entirety of the year until the 26th. So, but those particular days can be very helpful, but also Mars moves into your 5th house, so this is really going to give you a much greater sense of your own personal allure and sexual charisma. From the 9th of June to the 21st of July, Mars is going to be revving up your sense of attractiveness in a big way. But that's when we're sort of socializing, showing off, trying to draw stuff to us. What about the relationships? Well, Venus is in your 7th house, which is very harmonious, from the 17th of June to the 12th of July. And Mars is in the 7th house, where it can be a bit more robust, from the 5th of September to the 4th of November. So you can see he's got lots of opportunities this year around setting your individual intentions, your professional aims, changing things within how you live at home, but also in terms of your relationships and also just having fun and getting into the social world. But communication, just be aware that Mercury, for those 10 weeks, from the 10th of March to the 15th of May, there could be some niggles around the home and emotional part of life. But Mercury then moves back into Sagittarius, as I did say before, on the 12th of November and goes retrograde from the 26th of November to the 15th of December, ending its year back in the 12th house. So essentially, if you resist working with that more psychological energy, I feel that there will be times this year when you do, despite all this positivity, feel a little bit detached, a bit lost, lacking in confidence, a bit insecure, maybe a bit nervous, but you have a choice. You can choose to integrate the shadow side of your nature, and that's where it's important we don't let pride get in the way, and we do work on our vulnerabilities. And if you do that, there's so much you can gain this year. And also in terms of travel and higher education, from the 2nd of July through to the 25th, you've got real opportunities to break out. And I also feel that everyday technology and communications is going to be influenced strongly by Neptune and Saturn. But remember, you do have Saturn in that glorious link with Jupiter in the first 3 months of this year. In terms of your health, work, diet, The second half of the year is going to be interesting because that's where Jupiter moves into the 6th house. So if you set your goals high at the start of the year and you're still not feeling that the rewards are coming, the second half of the year can provide opportunities. But that takes us round to that lunar eclipse which occurs on the 18th of September. This is a new series between Virgo and Pisces, but it is very, very close to Neptune. So I think it's important to understand that something that you discuss in the last quarter of this year could have quite a profound impact upon you. But if you really want to seize the moment, as I think you may, the solar eclipse, which occurs on the 2nd of October, is very close to Mercury, and you can bring the curtain down, the cosmic curtain down, on the last quarter of this year, really firing towards those big hopes and goals that are important to you. But I think it's just important to understand with the Mercury retrogrades going through psychological areas, Mercury in Sag 12, Mercury in Aries 4th, Mercury in Leo 8th, they're all very psychological, but they're all passionate. You need to express your passion around your emotions this year. But if you're integrating your emotions and you've got good people around you and you're cautious around the people who are not so much in your corner, and you get your home and emotional life improved, there are massive opportunities for you to reach for the stars this year. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Capricorn. Thank you so much for joining me. Wishing you all the best for the new year. Please like, comment, share or subscribe.